Hey there, folks. This is Pop Culture. I'm Alex Pop. And it's been a while since the last good aviation thriller, wouldn't you say? There's something about crime going on at 30,000 feet that's uniquely thrilling, which is why I'm looking forward to Mel Gibson's new movie, Flight Risk, which I will be seeing tonight. I know the ratings aren't looking great for it, but I'll decide for myself. And there are a few others in that category that I've been wanting to talk about. One of which is a flick that I have a soft spot for, titled Flightplan. Released in September of 2005, it was not a big hit with critics, but was a financial success, grossing 4 times its $55 million budget. Jodie Foster stars as an aircraft engineer named Kyle Pratt, who boards a flight from Berlin to New York with her 6-year-old daughter Julia for the funeral of her husband, his casket being transported on the plane. After dozing off for a few hours, Kyle wakes up to find that her daughter has seemingly vanished without a trace. Julia, her belongings, her boarding pass are nowhere to be found, and the flight attendants inform Kyle that there wasn't even any record of her being on the flight. So she goes on a frantic quest through the plane to find out just what in the heck is going on. Flightplan is a little something of a landmark in my film diary, as it was the second PG-13 movie that I was allowed to see, the first being Pirates of the Caribbean. I saw the trailer on a DVD, I can't remember what DVD it was, but the trailer for Flightplan really intrigued me. I had just turned 12, and it was unlike any concept I had ever seen in a movie before. I was so fascinated, I had to see it to find out what happens. So a few days later, I asked my parents about it over dinner, and fortunately, they had already seen the movie in theaters, so they knew what content to expect. They were a little hesitant, but they gave me the okay. And when we rented it, we made sure to visit video only, because if you don't, you'll be sorry. My apologies to all fellow Northwesterners for reminding you of that catchphrase. This was also technically my introduction to Jodie Foster. The only reason I recognized her name at the time was because I knew a lot about the presidents. So when her name appeared in the trailer, I was like, Jodie Foster? As in the one whom John Hinckley tried to impress by shooting President Reagan? My parents were like, one and the same. And she is really good in this role, through all the stages of worry she goes through. Everywhere from, hey, have you seen my daughter? To, who has done what with my daughter? She's great at displaying that progression. In earlier scenes, her daughter Julia is played by an actress named Marlene Lawston, and on my second viewing years later, I did think her acting was extremely wooden.
What kind is it, Mom?
It's an E474. It's brand new.
Did you make it?
However, giving it more thought, the character did just go through the loss of her father. It's not uncommon for kids to be that dead in personality after going through tragedy. In the supporting cast are 2 actors who are actually very afraid of flying. Peter Sarsgaard as an air marshal who looks after Kyle on her search for her daughter, and Sean Bean as the plane's captain. And to answer your first question, this is one of the few times you will ever see him make it to the end credits. And I knew there was something familiar about this redhead kid on the flight, but I had to look it up. He turned out to be Forrest Landis, aka Mark in Sheeper by the Dozen. I guess I suffer from Lois Lane syndrome because I almost didn't recognize him without the glasses. This movie is directed by Robert Schwentke, who has quite a variety of directing credits. He brought us Red, which I enjoyed fairly well, and The Time Traveler's Wife, which was a mixed bag for me. He brought us a couple of snoozers with Snake Eyes and R.I.P.D., plus 2 of the Divergent movies. I personally thought Insurgent was great, Allegiant not so much. While he's made a name for himself with adaptations of comics or novels, Flightplan is one of the only films of his that is completely original work. The result is a mostly smooth flight that comes in for a bumpy landing. The basic premise is sort of a smarter version of a film that came out the year before, The Forgotten, with Julianne Moore. That was a weird movie, and not in a good way. The contained and secluded location is what makes the mystery of this little girl's disappearance so eerie. In such a situation, it's very easy to spill out the words, she couldn't have gone far.
I'm just looking for my daughter.
Well, she can't have gone too far.
But the funny thing in this case is that it's absolutely true. She couldn't have gone far. They're in the middle of a flight 36,000 feet up. It's a borderline Hitchcockian idea that's captivating at least for the first 2/3 of the movie, and I'll explain what I mean in a bit. On my first viewing, I was entranced by the mystery. I was 12 years old, on the edge of my seat. And with such a mystery, the movie works great by keeping things personal and maintaining the focus on Kyle's point of view. Again, for the first two-thirds. It doesn't try to get your heart rate rising with rapidly alternating perspectives or suspenseful music. In fact, the atmosphere is surprisingly melancholy. The soundtrack only occasionally grows higher than soft piano notes. More good work from my favorite film composer, James Horner. Gone too soon. As this was 2005, the movie manages to pretty organically work in some post-9/11 paranoia as well. There's a point when Kyle confronts a couple of Arab men, accusing them of being the kidnappers. This mainly has to do with her likening them to some men who appeared to be watching her through a window the night before. Although they take it as nothing but racial profiling, you do get the sense that there's an element of her desperation making her resort to that. So for the first hour and 5 minutes, it's a really solid whodunit, if anyone done it. It's the third act where the movie unfortunately derails due to a very poor storytelling decision. This is the point when I need to get into spoilers, so if you haven't seen the movie and you don't want it ruined, you don't want to proceed with this video yet. So here's the deal. Like I said, the focus is kept on Kyle trying to get to the bottom of this, and the movie does humor the possibility that she may be losing her marbles. Eventually, she herself almost comes to accept that, until she notices the one detail that the culprit missed. A little heart that Julia drew in her breath on the window when her dad's casket was being loaded onto the plane. Now, that I like. The problem is when Carson arrests her after she breaks into the freight deck. Once he gets up and leaves her with a flight attendant, the focus is shifted onto him walking alone. And just like that, we know he's the one behind it. The effect the movie had up until that point is gone all at once. And it even goes further to show him removing explosive devices that he had snuck on board via the coffin, and then we get a full-on confirmation. As a kid, that reveal did have my jaw on the floor, and the creepy music really sold it. But having developed a more critical eye, I have to say that the movie does a huge disservice to itself by allowing the audience to find out exactly what's going on before Kyle does. In fact, let's say for a minute that we didn't have all that revealed to us, and watch some later scenes with that mindset. Like this one after the plane makes an emergency landing in Newfoundland surrounded by FBI agents.
Enough. Miss Pratt, your money has been wired, just as you asked. A G3 is waiting, just as you asked. Perhaps we can do without the pretense of the missing child now.
Just imagine if, like Kyle, this is when we realize that she's being framed. And then, when it dawns on her that Carson is setting her up as a terrorist demanding a $50 million ransom, she starts playing his game in front of the crew and orders that he stay on the plane as long as she tells him to.
Or you can go back there and tell them that I'm the hijacker. Who knows, maybe they'll believe you.
Maybe I'll tell them what you've got in your pocket.
Go ahead. The first one to go will be your daughter.
Again, imagine if this was our realization that he is Julia's abductor. All of this would be so much more engaging if the movie hadn't given away what's happening 15 minutes too early. And in addition to the way it reveals Carson's plot, there are like a dozen things that needed to go exactly his way in order to pull it off. First off, it relies on all 400 passengers not seeing, or at the very least not remembering, that Kyle had a daughter with her. He had to know that the two of them would be the first on the plane, which I guess makes sense given that Kyle helped design the plane, so she might have the privilege of boarding before the other passengers. But then, it also relies on the two of them moving to empty seats in the back to lay down for a while, allowing Carson to drug Julia and carry her away with no one noticing. And he had to know that her kidnapping would somehow give Kyle the thought of searching her husband's casket for her, and that he would make it down there just in the nick of time before she closed and locked it again, so he could retrieve the explosives later. When you get down to it, it's really by pure luck that his scheme got as far as it did. To give the movie more credit, though, you do realize how clever some of the details are on repeat viewings. Like Carson needing to get Kyle into the freight deck is why he didn't immediately put her in handcuffs after she lunged on one of the Arab guys unprovoked. As well as some instances in the first hour where we do see Julia's whereabouts at the nose of the plane, just not her behind the ledge. And the movie is completely casual about it, feeding into the illusion that we've seen just about everywhere she could possibly be. Another thing that might be worth addressing is that the Association of Professional Flight Attendants called for a boycott of this movie over the portrayal of the flight attendants, particularly the fact that one of them is in cahoots with Carson. They stated that in the event of a hijacking situation like 9/11, it's imperative that the cabin crew have the support of the passengers and not the distrust that the movie could incite. True, but I think the majority of the audience knows that. Sometimes you need a few bad apples in order to make a movie happen. I think the real lesson to be taken from this is, just suspect this woman whenever a little girl goes missing.
How'd it get burned? How'd it get burned? How'd it get burned? How'd it get burned?
I don't know!
The only other quibble I have is that when Kyle detonates just enough of the explosives to incinerate Carson, the effects in the scene look a little on the iffy side. Although after everyone saw her as a lunatic to the point that they were applauding her arrest, it was one of the most satisfying things to my 12-year-old self to see them all watching her emerge from the smoke with her daughter in her arms. Later that morning, Julia finally wakes up, and it's a cute little moment with her asking her mom, "Are we there yet?" And then the man that Kyle verbally and physically attacked earlier hands her suitcase, and she responds with an approving smile. Even on my first viewing, I thought she owed him a little more than that. She ought to be on her knees begging for his forgiveness. So in the end, Flightplan is a good movie that could have easily been great. It botches its premise in the third act, and there are a few too many things that you need to just go along with. But I still applaud it for the ambition, the atmosphere, and the solid acting from the cast. It wowed me when I was a kid, and I'm cool with giving it another watch every now and then. Scoring on the Factor Facts, I'm going to give Flightplan a 65%. That's a wrap. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this review, and be sure to stick around for my review of Flight Risk coming soon. Like and share, subscribe for more. This is Pop Culture. I'm Alex Pop.